Hi, welcome back to another episode of Learning to Turn with me, Beau Legouge. The next operation is to carve a recess for mounting the blank on a chuck. When I finished the last operation, I was so excited about how well it had gone and impatient to jump into the next phase that I just went for it before I recorded this intro. That might work to our advantage in an unanticipated way because you can see the end result as I discuss the steps in this operation. Carving this recess involves 3 cuts. We start with a scooping out cut, like so, to clear space for the second step, which is to use the bowl gouge as a scraper to cut straight into the face, widening the recess, like so. You'll recognize that as being the same as the second alternate method for flattening the face that we just covered, so we don't need to cover the specifics here again. The third and final phase of this operation is to form the undercut or dovetail that mates with this angle on the jaws. This is what holds the blank on the chuck, so it's arguably one of the most important cuts we'll make. This cut uses a type of scraper called a Badan. I've ground the end of this tool to an angle of about 78-79 degrees, so that's 11 to 12 degrees from square. That way, if I position it with the bevel flush to the face and push it straight in, the undercut will be the desired angle. Grinding the tool at the right angle, not right angle, but the correct angle, also yields an inner face here that is parallel to the main face, which is nearly as important as the undercut mating with the dovetail angle on the jaws. While that angle is what keeps the blank on the jaws, this inside face is what provides location and stability. See, this face sits against the end of the jaws here, and that connection is what keeps the blank from moving as you shape the outside of the bowl a couple of operations from now. If these surfaces don't meet nice and tight, then the blank will at a minimum vibrate as you shape the outside of the bowl. Worse yet, it could actually shift positions on you and no longer well set at all. Circling back to what this has to do with the angle on the Badan, if it was ground square, there it is. If it was ground square, then as I pushed it in at an angle to form the undercut, then the inside face would be angled, so only the edges of the jaws here would be in contact. All right, that's enough theory. Let's move on to practice. Before we get to the 3 cuts in this operation, the first step is to mark the circle for the diameter of the jaws when they're fully closed. To do that, take a sturdy compass and set it to the diameter of the chuck. It's about right. Then rest one pointer of the compass on the tool rest, making your best guess as to where it is centered. Then press that into the face of the blank lightly, observing whether the line you're etching aligns with the other pointer. If it's off, then adjust the position to zero in and then score a deeper line. Take care to keep the pointer on the far side away from the wood. If it touches, it'll dig in and might just get torqued out of your hand. All right, so now that we know how big to make the recess, let's dig into the particulars for the first and third cuts. Again, we already know about the second one. For the initial entry cut, we'll be using a 40-40 bowl gouge. I think in the Vimeo clip where Stuart shows this, he's using a 3/4 inch gouge, the Papa Bear, but I felt more comfortable using my Mama Bear, the 5/8 inch gouge. Tool rest height is standard, a little bit below center. Tool rest distance is 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch from the face. Stance is right foot forward, and that's something we'll be talking about a little bit in the voiceover, as it wasn't quite what I was expecting going in. The left-hand position is on top, reaching over the tool rest. Vertical tool angle is a standard, about 10 degrees. Horizontal tool angle is 65 degrees, so if this is 90 degrees, then we're coming back to about 65, which if you subtract the 40-degree bevel, means I'm cutting in at about 25 degrees. Flute angle is about 2 o'clock. The cut is a scooping action, meaning that after the bevel is set, I'll swing the handle back towards myself and at the same time twist the gouge slightly to close the flute a little bit. For the third step, cutting the dovetail, the tool again is this Badan. Stance, feet are parallel to the bed. Tool rest height. Now Stuart keeps his tool rest at the standard height, a bit below center, but the recess he's cutting has a wider diameter, 5 or 6 inches, which gives more space for the handle to clear the tailstock. Because my recess is only 4 inches, I found I had to raise the tool rest to make the geometry work. Tool rest distance is at least 1/2 inch. I found when I had it farther back, or closer in, that I had difficulty manipulating the tool correctly. Left hand position, again, the geometry is different here. Stuart had his hand under the tool with thumb and forefinger pulling down. But again, with his larger diameter, he has more room to work with. So I found I had to work with my left hand on the side and the thumb on top pressing straight down. Vertical tool angle, this dimension, is minus 20 degrees, so we're pointing downhill. I haven't studied the use of scrapers much, but I gather that they're safe and controllable only at a downward angle like this, at least with end grain, like we're cutting here. Horizontal tool position is 100 to 102 degrees by my calculation. That's 10 to 12 degrees beyond perpendicular with the handle towards the back side of the lathe. That's to create the undercut for the dovetail. The technique is a simple push in the longitudinal direction of the tool. The main thing to make sure of is that the cut is clean with no torn fibers or dust that would interfere with the piece seating properly on the jaws. Now it'll become evident very soon that I deviate in some pretty big ways from what's spelled out above. So I might as well just confess that I was so eager to jump into this operation that I didn't spend as much time reviewing my notes as I should have, which I guess kind of defeats the purpose of this whole series. Because of that, I'm going to be grabbing a few more blanks, get them flattened off like this, and then do them the right way. I'll call out in the voiceover when we get to that set, and we'll see if the differences in technique make much difference in the results or in my comfort and control in achieving them. I think that about does it for setting up this operation, so I will cue the footage that I shot over the last couple of days and also shoot a little bit extra with the new blocks and doing things the right way. See you on the other side.
All right, we are diving right in here. I'll get to why that's the case in a second. But you can see I already had the circles scribed or scored to show me how big I wanted to make this recess. And there's the scooping maneuver to start the cut, create space so then I can go to the scraping operation and clear the wood out, make space for bringing the Badan in to make the undercut, which of course is the most important part of this operation, is getting that recess, the dovetail cut. Here we're just making the space for both the Badan to work and also so the jaws aren't hitting something other than the outside of the recess. The reason we cut straight in here without any kind of preamble, without even showing you me scoring it with the compass, it's just one of several mistakes I made, kind of a comedy of errors on the video production side. Didn't have this camera rolling earlier, and this camera, this is a GoPro that's mounted up above. It somehow ended up shooting in portrait instead of landscape, so this shot isn't particularly well framed, but didn't have much to work with. And the other shot, the low angle, was so low that the tailstock was in the way, so for at least this first blank or two we're going to be sticking with the overhead view until I got smart and moved the camera to where you could actually see what was going on. Made a few other mistakes along the way on the video production side, but hey, we're here to learn to turn, not to go into cinematography school, which is, I guess, a good thing. All right, so we're now in a process where I'm kind of taking a number of hacks at getting this right. I'm just not trusting that Badan to be making a good recess, dovetail, undercut, and I just keep going at it. I think there may be a little bit of an optical illusion where that 10, 12 degree dovetail just doesn't, your eye doesn't see that it's undercut. It looks like it's square when it's not. But anyway, I think I make 5 or 6 stabs at this one. Of course, each time I'm making that recess a little bit larger, which is not really ideal. There is an optimal size for the recess to get maximum contact with the jaws. And each time you go bigger, what ends up happening is you're gripping only with the kind of the center of each jaw. The corners or edges of the jaws are no longer in contact, so you don't have nearly as good a seat grip. There are 2 elements that need to be right here. You need to have that undercut dovetail angle. That's what is gripped by basically the sides of the jaws, and the face that's cut by the end of the Badan needs to be straight and not have anything else in the way, so that basically the top or end of the jaws can seat against that face, and that's what provides registration or just stability. Once you put this on the chuck and you're working on the other side, sometimes you're applying considerable force. All right, so that was blank number 1. We're moving on to 2, and here we're going to see what happens if you don't heed my warning about keeping the far side of the compass from making contact with the wood that's spinning up. And there you see that I let it make contact, and it got almost torn out of my hands. There we see our first skid on entry, where I did not approach the wood right. I didn't have my thumb against the tool rest to prevent it from skidding. And anytime you're coming into the wood with a gouge that's on its side, and kind of flute angle to the side, it is prone to skidding. So you really got to have your thumb against the tool rest there to keep it from getting away from you. We've now increased the speed. I think we're at 2.5x. At this point, we'll be going up to 4x from here on out, except for slowing down for a couple of them. Again, kind of feeling my way, making a pass with the Badan, stopping, taking a look at what I got, and for the first few blanks, coming at it again and again and again. At some point here, I actually pulled out my angle gauge to check whether I actually had this thing cut to 12 degrees. It was, like I said, I wasn't trusting that it had enough of an undercut, and it's kind of scary. You're going to put this thing on a chuck if you don't have it undercut properly. You're not going to be able to really see that on the chuck, and B, it then is not being held on the way you're counting on. So it's more likely to just basically fall off the chuck at high speed. which can be bad news for both you and the blank. Since this operation is all about getting it on the chuck and keeping it there, it's probably a good time to talk about why we're starting with this operation. So, we started with flattening the face. That's just in order to get a good surface to work on for this operation. But the reason we want to get this on the chuck as soon as we can, because it's just way more stable. You have a better grip by the lathe to drive the blank and not have it slip. Right now I'm using a star drive, which in the event of a catch, it can get torn out. Not torn off the lathe, I suppose that could happen too, but just where it strips out, and then you have trouble getting it to seat again and maintain registration. So you can turn faster, you can turn with greater grip when it's on a chuck. Right now, this is what's called between centers. You have the headstock with the star drive in it and the tailstock with a live center, letting it just spin, and the pressure holds it in place, and that's not nearly as secure as being on a chuck. Here we've slowed down to real time, and you can see just there I had it skid on me again. Did not have good enough grip, and when it skids like that, it often will basically erase the score that you're using to guide your work. So I had to grab the compass again and make a new mark. Have my thumb pressed better against the back side that time. Just before queuing this up to record the voiceover, I actually rewatched one video where Stuart is performing this much more adeptly. And actually, he's not putting his thumb against there, but a couple of things are different, which, of course, since I just saw that, I haven't had a chance to try myself. He's using an overhand grip with the left hand, which I believe is what I had in the notes, but as I said when we were going over the particulars, I didn't review those notes before doing this. So he was using an overhand grip and no thumb behind the tool. And he was coming in, and for that entry cut, he was coming in with a much steeper tool angle, probably I would guess as steep as 20, maybe 25 degrees. So a real uphill approach. And then once he started the cut, then he lifted the handle to complete it and rotated the flute to a more closed position through the course of that operation. Which brings me back to a topic that we're going to be returning to probably just about every episode, and that is grain. So, as established in the first episode, the side of this blank that we're working on is side grain. And you can do a lot of stuff with side grain. End grain is a different matter, and the thing is, once we start cutting into the side grain, then we're dealing with end grain. So that initial scooping cut, you're coming in at an oblique angle, about 25 degrees, getting a little bit of end grain at that point. Once you begin the scoop and the angle of the cut becomes, how do I put it, towards the center, you're going basically straight into end grain at that point. And that's why you don't go very far with that scoop. You're going just far enough to clear space so you can flip the tool over and do the scraping cut into it without the heel getting grabbed. For the cut with the Bedan, where that's a simple push in with a scraper, the end grain isn't as much in play because you don't have a tool. Notice here that the tool is pointed downhill, so you're not dealing with a blade pointing uphill into end grain for that particular cut. But with every cut you make, you need to be thinking about the grain. And as Stuart points out in the video that I watched just before recording this voiceover, about the only time you're dealing exclusively with side grain is the peeling cut, or the facing off cut to flatten the side of a bowl blank, or when you're rounding down a spindle blank, where the grain is in line with the bed, and you're turning the outside of that down to the round. And even there, as soon as you start doing any coves or beads that is cutting into that spindle blank, once again you have introduced end grain. And so one of the keys to turning successfully, where success is defined not so much as the quality of the end result, but whether your tool catches. The thing that it controls whether you're going to be successful in that particular mission is whether you manage to avoid pointing a tool, a blade, uphill into end grain. All right, we've switched from that whole last blank. We were going at regular speed. Now that we're on to blank number 6, we're back up to high speed. And this is about where I kind of found my rhythm. The next several blanks go pretty quickly, and not just because we've sped it up, but just notice that I'm doing 1 or 2 cuts is all with the Bedan. I'm no longer, taking 3, 4, 5 cuts at it with the Bedan, trying to get it just right. This one in particular, blank number 7, I got a quick scoop, 2 quick scraping cuts to clear some space, grab the Bedan, single push into there, and I'm done. It finally, after 5 blanks with a certain amount of struggles, I kind of found the beam, and these next few go pretty smooth, quick, and easy. The scraping cut there is one I'm still not, even several months later. It's been a few months since I recorded this, and I've done a fair number of bowls since then. And I'm still struggling with that scraping cut. It'll grab, it'll end up, the thing that bothers me most is, I'm starting from a flat surface, and somehow it keeps getting uneven. So, grabby. I suspect that's because you are dealing with side grain and end grain, and that it will slice nicely in the side grain and then bounce out on the end grain. I'm not sure if that's the problem, but even now that I have considerably more comfort with a lot of these operations, that's one that still is not quite working for me. So any seasoned pros out there who are watching me and see what I'm doing wrong, please pipe up in the comments and help me get this one right. It's not a critical cut to get just so. This area is all going to be hollowed out for the final bowl, so it doesn't matter if it's pretty at this point. But I definitely need to get a better handle on the proper technique for that scraping cut, where the tool is turned over and you're pushing it straight into the face like that. In fact, it's kind of funny, as I watch myself doing it here, it almost feels like I was doing it better back then in December, January, whenever that was, than I am right now. Maybe I need to pull out a bunch of blanks and practice at it again instead of worrying about making bowls. Kind of like I was doing back then. I gotta say, that was probably one of the smartest things I've done is to do this, 15, 20 bowls, practicing the same operation. As I said in the main intro, this is not the way that I would recommend anybody go about learning, as far as doing it on your own without a seasoned pro over your shoulder to coach you on technique. But given that I was going at it that way, this approach of practicing a single operation over and over, as opposed to making 20 bowls in a row where I went through the entire process, I think it really helped me to get a handle on the basic operations much quicker than any other way I could have done it. There's some inefficiencies in doing that, in that you're taking the bowl off and going to the next blank repeatedly rather than just working through the process. But it was a good trade-off for how much of a rookie I was coming into this. Keen-eyed observers among you may have noticed that about a minute ago, at the start of blank number 12, we slowed down to real time, and that's because we're coming to the point where you get to see that I made a pretty critical error for a number of blanks. I think 5 or 6 at least. And that is, I made these recesses too small. For a given set of jaws on a chuck, there's a minimum diameter that they can fit into a recess like this. You can only tighten it down so far, and that's the point. That defines the minimum diameter. Well, I had set my compass to what I thought was that size, but I don't know what happened, whether I got it the wrong size or somewhere along the way it got smaller. It got pinched down a little bit. But you can see here, I can't fit that chuck inside that recess. So I'm going to have to go through that whole set of blanks and find which ones are too small and put them back on. I'm not going to put you through the misery of watching me do that. It's a simple one more pass with the Badan to widen it out a little bit, and of course then double check with the compass that I got it big enough this time. But that's something I should have been checking all along, and I just kind of assumed that I was getting it right, and that cost me at least half an hour going back and pulling out a pile of blanks and putting them back on the chuck. Every time you do that too, there's at least a small risk of things not getting perfectly centered. You always have the pointer on the drive center and the live center, so it's probably not a real high risk, but the 4 teeth on the star drive, sometimes one of those will be a little bunged up and they won't go together exactly the same unless you happen to get those 4 points in their original location. I've heard a couple of turners talk about when they take a blank off the chuck, off of a star drive like that, they'll actually mark one. They have one of the points. It has a mark on it on the drive head, and they will mark on the wood which one is aligned with that particular dog. It seems like a smart idea. You may not be planning to put it back on there, but sometimes the best laid plans don't amount to a hill of beans, I believe the saying is. As you can see, we're on blank 14 here, and that's worth calling out because it's the last of the blanks that I did this operation on, or set of operations on, before actually reviewing the notes. So this is where I was more or less winging it based on my best recollections. So this 15 is the first blank where I actually had reviewed my notes. One difference you can see right out of the gate is that I'm using the overhand grip, and a good firm one, with the left hand to, among other things, keep the tool from skating on entry. Note that the skating issue, that really is a problem only at the very beginning of the cut, at the entry point. Once you've set the bevel, it really can't skate. That goes for this cut too. In this case, the tendency is for the tool to skate towards the center, which of course is a bad thing because there's metal there, and you don't generally want your gouge running into metal. In this case, it would be the heel of the tool hitting the live center, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but avoid it if you can. One other thing that I believe I changed at this point, after reviewing my notes, is stance. And you may recall that in the intro to this episode, I mentioned some confusion when I dove in without having reviewed notes, that I didn't get the stance right. And I'm actually a little uncertain about what exactly the problem was, because so much time has passed since I recorded this and did it. But I believe the problem was that I was not right foot forward. And in case you're inclined to think that stance is kind of a trivial thing and you needn't worry too much about it, let me disabuse you of that, because it really is a critical kind of foundation for turning. Stuart devotes 2 whole episodes of his Vimeo series to stance, and there are basically 3 of them, 3 ways of standing at the lathe, broadly speaking. Obviously the exact foot position varies, but 3 basic ways of arranging your feet. There's left foot forward, right foot forward, and feet parallel to the bed. Let's start with the parallel to the bed. That one is used only for cuts where you are making a straight cut across the outside of the blank, the what's going to end up being the round part. Sometimes it's not round until after you do the cut, but the round part of the piece of wood. And for those, when you're doing basically a flattening cut, which we'll be doing in the next episode, for that one, you position your feet parallel to the bed. You will go into the details further, but you position your left foot so that you're in a comfortable position at the end, and then you generally are doing a weight transfer from right to left to make the cut. And that's about the only time you use parallel. As I say that, I think of one other where it's parallel because it's an angled cut, but it's you're doing a weight transfer to achieve that from, parallel from one foot to the other. That's for cutting the angle as the first step of shaping the outside. Let me interrupt myself here just to point out that blank number 15, the first one that I did, new blank that I had rolled out to practice doing this right. That one ended up having a crack that I discovered right at the end that I decided, I think basically once I had the undercut, it became evident that one side of that was going to blow out. If I had put it on the chuck and expanded the chuck, it was just going to crack that piece off. So that one didn't really get out of the gate. Returning to the topic of stance, let's go to left foot forward next. That's used for any straight cut that's basically into the wood, where you're not going parallel to the bed, you're going at some angle into the wood. It might be straight in with a parting tool on a spindle. It would be a straight cut where you're making essentially a conical shape. For making bowls, the main place that you do a straight cut with left foot forward is, you know about this already, the flattening off of the face that we did in the first episode. So the thing that the straight cuts, both with parallel stance and left foot forward stance, have in common is that the right arm, the right hand that's holding and guiding the tool is supposed to be held firm to the body, and the operation is performed simply by weight transfer. Curved cuts are completely different because they involve moving your arm independent of your body. You're generally starting with the tool away from your body and drawing it towards you, and you need to be able to do both weight transfer but also basically move your body out of the way of the tool, at least in some cases. And so that requires the right foot being forward. Well, the scooping operation is a curved cut. I'm starting with the tool away from my body and then drawing it towards me. And initially I was standing with my feet in the wrong position and was basically wrestling with the tool or having to lean very awkwardly to get out of the way of it as I finished that operation. It got way easier once I remembered that I was supposed to be going right foot forward. That is enough about stance, at least for now. If you want to learn more, check out Stuart's 2 episodes in the Vimeo series on the topic. But right now we need to return to what's going on in front of us here. We're coming up on blank number 20, the last in this episode, and check that out. Top center, that is rot. And if you see the black line at the bottom that was kind of hidden under the tailstock, it's actually worse there. This is a blank. Maybe I couldn't have noticed that too obviously when it was covered in the end grain seal, but certainly after I had flattened off the edge, I should have noticed that. I should have taken this blank out of circulation and put it in the wood pile, but I didn't, and we'll see what happens. It's not the most dramatic thing in the world, but I almost feel fortunate that it wasn't worse, because I've seen blanks in in what appeared to be better shape come into 2 large, heavy pieces and go flying across the shop. The fact that we're only going to have a chunk of it come flying out here in just a few more seconds, I guess might actually count as lucky. There it goes. We'll cue that back up and see it again in slow motion after we check out just exactly how rotten this piece was. I mean, imagine even if it hadn't torn out there, once I put this thing on a chuck, it would have been useless. Probably would have popped. Let's put pressure on it and wait for it. There we go. Alright, time for me to toss it back to myself at the anchor desk.
Well, all right, that'll do it for this episode. We got ourselves 14 blanks with one face flattened and the recess cut here for the chuck. Not all of these 14 are going to make it to the finish line and become bowls. We got flaws like major cracks in this one and various other punky wood and things that'll keep them from being a decent bowl. But hey, good practice wood. Learned a few things here, as you've seen. Things have gone reasonably well, I think, apart from a couple of mistakes that nobody got hurt. Next time around, we'll be flipping that around, put that on the chuck, and turn these things into a nice cylindrical balanced shape to be able to crank up the speed and get a bit more done. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you later.